Welcome to the Flex web series, Onboarding Basics. This web series is designed for new customers who have recently signed up to Flex, or for new employees of existing customers to help get up to speed quickly. Today, we'll be following up from our Inventory Basics meeting, which we hope you watched, to do inventory structure and availability. We're going to go to the same item that we created in our Inventory Basics of this HDMI cable for starting out in this. Now in this, we can go and hit to edit the model, and that will bring up the same list we've been looking at previously. But we're now wanting to talk about structure and availability. Now in the structure and availability, there's about a dozen presets here that are available through this drop-down menu. But I like to talk about these in relative to the settings, because when I change a drop-down menu, it's going to change the yes or no among these 7 options here. And so I'm going to talk about those specific options, and then I'm going to show you some example items to help explain that. Okay. So for the first thing here, we have tracked by SN, or tracked by serial number. Okay. We can turn that on, and it will change the item to be a serialized model. Now the simple thing in this is these are the 2 most common sorts of items. An item will either be non-serialized, which is also commonly referred to as bulk or quantity, or a serialized model where each separate unit has its own individual barcode or asset number and is tracked. Now, those items are commonly have their own manufacturer serial number, but that is not required. Sometimes there are items that we choose to serialize that do not have a manufacturer serial number, and that field can be blank. Okay. The key in this is it's a decision that every company has to make for each item on whether you'd like to keep this as a non-serialized or a quantity item or a serialized model. When doing this, a non-serialized model is processed faster, more easily, but has more room for human error because you're going to count individually and you're going to type in that number into the system. So both the counting and the typing has room for human error. But instead on the serialized model, you instead have to process each barcode on each unit, and that can be time-taking. But because of that, the information will be much more accurate. In this, I tend to recommend to people on analyzing any item on whether you want to serialize or non-serialize it, is to think of 2 main factors. The first is the value of the item, what it costs you to purchase a new one. The more expensive the item is, the more likely you want accurate information and you would like to serialize it. Cheaper items, you're less concerned with the accuracy of that. If you lose some, it's not as big of a deal. Now, the other thing is how easy is it to put a barcode on and process that barcode while prepping a rental. Okay. The key on this is sometimes items may be cheaper, and so you don't necessarily need to serialize, but they're easy to put a barcode, so you might go ahead and do that. An example on this from my previous experience is maybe a simple router, maybe $50, and it's stored with other items that are going to be serialized because they're more expensive. And so I go ahead and serialize it and put barcodes. It's got a nice flat surface. As opposed to, I may have a piece of drape. It's very large, it's very bulky, and not a good place. I can't really put a sticker on that piece of fabric. I could write on it, but then I still have to see it and type it. And so that's harder. And so though it may be worth over $300, I'm still going to keep that non-serialized. But again, for every company, you got to make this decision on your own how you want to do that. Okay. So in this, again, for these cables in here, we were likely going to leave this as a non-serialized model and just count them. Okay. And we just keep a count of how many we have, and we're okay with that. Whereas opposed, we could go up into our audio and our speakers, and I'm going to open up this VRX 932 speaker. That is something I'm going to want to serialize. They cost over $2,000 a piece. I really want to make sure we're tracking these items more accurately. Now the preset here is the next thing, and we're going to go ahead and move on to that. Okay. Now our next setting in this list is our model contents. Now I don't personally like this, and there's actually going to be an update to that in the near future. What I like is that tagging there with accessories. We see if I say yes with accessories, if I change this to no, it just goes back to serialized model. Okay. That with accessories says this item is going to have certain accessories. And when we say accessories, there's a few things that's going to do. Those items are going to always go onto my list, my quote, or my pull sheet when I add this item. They're going to be children of it, which means in the default settings, I'm not going to communicate those accessories to the customer. I'm just reminding my warehouse staff of these accessories that need to go. And they do not add additional cost to the price on it. They're accessories of this item. We're only charging for this item. That accessories is currently listed in this contents tab. And so you can see on this specific unit, it has this NL4 jumper cable, an ultimate speaker stand, and a case as the contents or the accessories that go with this that I'm not extra charging for, but I want to make sure are provided. Now, one thing to note on this, these are currently all set to have a quantity of 0.5. Meaning when I add this, for every 2 I add, it will only add 1 of these. Now, on my quantities, I cannot have decimals at that point. I cannot have partial quantities. And so if I, for some reason, added 3 speakers, it would round up to 2 and give me 2 of those. But it's not an item that I would commonly do that for, and so it's not a big concern. Also note in this, you could go smaller. You can go actually 2 decimal places, or you can have multiple. You could have something that every time I send 1 of, I need 2 of some cable or attachment with it. Okay, so keep in mind on that. Okay, so that's that key of that with accessories. And like I said, the key thing we want to remember is those accessories are going to always add. They're going to be children, not visible to the customer by default, and they are not adding any cost to that rental. Okay, so with that, we're going to go, and I'm going to, first we'll just take a peek at the next setting, but then I'm going to go open a different item relative to it. So the next setting in this is unit container. Okay, unit container generally means the item would be a case. But all it really means is that other items can be scanned or digitally placed inside this item. Now, again, that generally means case, but you could have an example of some kind of processor or a audio console that you have a swappable cards and you want to keep track of which card is inside that. That audio console is not a case, but you can still make it a unit container so you can put that card inside there and know where it is. Okay, we're going to talk about mostly in the general examples. So the next preset we're going to talk about is also going to talk about anytime we get into that unit container, we're going to relative to this content available. That's going to matter. So first, we're going to go into our amplifier section here, and we're going to open this crown amp rack. Okay. In this crown amp rack, we have in here that this is the preset of a serialized package. In that serialized package, it is tracked by serial number. And an important thing to note, anytime a unit container is yes, it must be tracked by serial number. I can't know that something has something inside a case if I don't know the difference between case 1 and case 2. So it must be serialized. Okay. And then on this one, it says the contents available are no. Meaning those contents, those specific pieces, we look at our picture, we've got 3 amplifiers in here. They're considered not available. And that's specifically because I don't want my sales guy to go, I have this show, it only needs a few channels, but I want to hide the amp underneath the stage. And so I need just a single amp. Well, you can't request any of the amps that are in this rack, because to do that, you'd have to tear apart my rack. And I don't want him to do that. So I've made those contents not available because this is something that I don't quote how many amps. I quote that I'm sending out an amp rack as sort of a package deal. Okay, that's that key thing. When you do that, you won't list those amps or any of the other parts that are inside of this case on there, but they will get listed on the manifest because they are stored inside of that. They are inside there. Okay, so that's the key with the serialized package. Amp rack is always a great example. I don't commonly use it a lot outside of that, though it may be something that we will change in the future, and we'll talk about that. So the more common thing for cases that I bring up, and for this, no, that's not the one I want. I have it down here. For my VRX speaker that we were looking at earlier. So for this one, this is called a serialized storage, okay? And we'll go look at those settings for it. But we'll see in here, as that serialized storage, we are tracked by serial number, still model contents, no, unit container, yes, and contents available, yes. That is because in this example, I don't quote to a customer that I'm going to send them 3 cases of 2 speakers. I tell them I'm sending you 6 speakers. And those speakers just happen to travel in these cases. But that's not the customer's concern. That's my concern. Okay? So I need these items to be available for use for rental, even though they store here. But I want to make sure my warehouse staff know when you put this away, this is what needs to go back in this case so that it's ready to go out the door next time. And when we do this serialized storage setting, we get this tab of storage requirements, where I can then go here and I can say, when you're putting this away, it means I need to get 2 of these 932 speakers and 1 of this NL4 jumper that goes back each time this case gets packaged. Okay, so that's that key there of what I want to do in that. And the storage requirements could be 1 item, could be lots of different items, but you're able to stay, that's what goes there. And so this is going to be very common for those items that when they store in some kind of set arrangement inside some kind of case in your warehouse, they travel in that to and from events, and then they come out and get set out separately on shows. Okay, so that serialized storage is that very common. Now, I do want to highlight one thing really quick, that the next setting is content permanent. And this content permanent is actually not part of any of the presets. And if I changed it to say yes, it wouldn't change this preset. Now, the key is I generally recommend do not set contents permanent. The key thing in this is this does not mean contents can or cannot be permanent. Its contents will default as permanent, meaning when I go to build a new one of those cases, as I scan any item inside of it, it will automatically tag it as permanent. Now, for my amp rack that I have here, that might be okay. It might be that anything that goes into this is going to be permanent. I've got it rack mounted in here. I've got zip tied in there. That's the case. But in a lot of other examples, there are some items that are loose that come out. They sit in a drawer. They, like these speakers in this case, they don't stay there. And so I do not want them to be permanent or I'm going to have inaccurate information. So I don't recommend that. Okay. Now the next setting, we're going to go and grab this case here. And this is used for my generic road cases. Okay, some people would call them their Cadillacs, their half trucks or quarter trucks or whatever. They're general road cases. Okay, and this is actually currently not on the right setting. I want to default this as a serialized free package. Under that setting, we're still tracked by serial number because we're a case and every case must be serialized. My contents available are no. But that's not really an issue because I expect when these are sitting in storage, they're empty. So there are no contents during the time that they're sitting in the warehouse. Okay. But the key is we add this one of free pick container. Yes. Free pick container says when I go to prep this on a show, I can digitally open it as I'm prepping, and as I pack my requirements, they can be understood to be going inside this case, rather than having to pre-plan and pre-arrange that. I may not know how much of my total cable amount will fit in this case, and so I just pack it as I prep, and if it gets full, you close this case, you go get another one, you open it up, and you continue to prep your items. Okay, so that's what that free pick container does for us, is that ability to prep the items into the case and understand the item's location as far as what case they're in, but do it as you're prepping the show rather than having to pre-think it. Now, for a small show, if there were only 3 or 5 cases, it's not that hard on a show site to go dig around and find that one item you're really looking for. But if you have a job that's full semi-truck, multiple semi-trucks, and you're missing one accessory, one thing, you're missing your truss bolts, then you may want to be able to quickly find them. And so if you properly do the serialized free package or the free pick containers as you're prepping those things, then you can make it so the paperwork will show you where they are. You can get your digital version of that paperwork, that manifest. You can search and find it and go, I'm told it's in A31. Go find A31, open it up, and I don't have to go open every case. So that's that big advantage of the free pick containers. And we'll get into demoing how that works when we get into the scanning processing. Okay. Now, I want to highlight one other thing where we've kind of talked about these, but there's a hybrid of the last two we had, and that's what this was shown on, of the serialized free pick storage container. And that only difference here is that contents available, yes or no. Okay. What that does is it says, well, this is a case that there's some items that store in here all the time. Maybe it's a cable trunk with a couple looms or a main snake head, but there's space on top of it, and that other cable changes from show to show. So I want to be able to tell guys, hey, when it comes back from a show, you got to put it back to baseline, that main snake, those couple accessories, that one loom, but there's room to pack other things. And so I want to still have it pop open into a free pick mode to fill the remainder of the case after when I'm prepping the show. Okay. Not super common, but I've definitely seen some people use it and find it very helpful there. Okay. So our last setting on this is a virtual item. The key thing on a virtual item, and you'll see here, if I take this and change this to yes, our track by serial number goes to no. Unlike on the unit container, a virtual item cannot be tracked by serial number because it's not actually an item. It's not anything that really exists. A virtual item is a concept of an item or a tool to help me get things on quotes. Okay, so I'm going to cancel and not mess this item up, and we're going to open one virtual item as an example in here. We're going to go within my video to my screens, and I'm going to open this projection screen. And this is always my favorite example of the virtual item. Now there's two kinds of virtual items, virtual package and virtual model. The only difference between those two is a virtual package says model contents or that accessories as yes, and the virtual model has that as no. Okay. And the thing I say is, if it all fails, make everything a virtual package, because even if you have that model content, if you don't put anything inside of it, it won't matter. It won't do anything. Okay. Virtual packages are going to be heavily content or accessory built. Virtual models are completely suggestion built. Now, we're not going to get into the details of suggestions today. And so I just want to talk a little bit on this virtual package, a little more about this contents or accessories. So the key thing in this screen example is I want to communicate to my customer one line, one price for my projection screen that they're getting. But for my warehouse, it's made up of all sorts of parts and pieces. And one key thing with that is we see in here that it's transported in 3 separate cases. Okay. So there is no one part or piece that I can make that connects to all of this. So instead, I want to communicate this concept of what is this screen as a virtual thing and communicate that it is the sum of the whole of its parts. Okay. Now, the positive thing with that is while it's not a full item, when I go to the quantity, it can still recap this item for me, though I do not have the ability to edit the quantity. I do not have a serial unit tab, because what it does is it takes that contents tab, that accessories tab, and it goes through all of these items and finds the lowest common denominator and then tells me, well, with what you tell me is required, with all of the different parts and their different quantities, I can for sure make one of these and you have those parts currently sitting in your warehouse available. Okay. But this is a virtual item. It's not a real thing. It will not track any of the actual. It's tracking the sum of its parts. Okay. Now, as I said, the virtual model, the next one is suggestion built. Now, one thing to note is any of these items, you can have suggestions. And so we'll cover that in a future webinar. We will get deeply into suggestions. So that's it for this one. If you have any questions, reach out to support@flexrentalsolutions.com. And as always, keep flexing.